Hi, hello, and welcome to my pop shield being in front of my camera. We're having a lot of fun here, doing streaming stuff over the last couple of days. Phoebe, who's in the chat, hi Phoebe, has been working out how to do Twitch streaming, basically, and I've been doing it too, which meant we've just been like chucking the microphone and webcam around the house, basically. I've got some weird stuff going on with my chat box coming up here where it's just spamming Phoebe's ooh-woos. I hope Phoebe's not just ooh-wooing the whole time. No, she's not. Okay. Well, it's just the chat box screwing up then. Let's get rid. Try it again. So I'm going to be here like for the next half hour, 45 minutes talking about Mulholland Drive, the David Lynch film that was this month's movie club. I thought it'd be better to run Movie Club as a sort of... Phoebe says she's promising that she's not spamming uwu. Fair enough. Let's see if that message comes up loads and loads. Yes, it does. Great. Well, that's definitely not very useful to have on screen. I've changed Movie Club to be a kind of monthly thing. I think that was easier than doing every 2 months because... It's every 2 months, every 2 weeks. Lives are difficult and busy sometimes, and you don't always have all of the time that you want to have to sit and watch a film, especially like a challenging film, one that you want to have thoughts and feelings around. So it's just like a bit more acceptable, I think, for people to have a smaller amount of films to watch every month. So that's why Mulholland Drive is the choice for the month, not for the 2-week period. So I chose David Lynch's Mulholland Drive, which is a really popular film, a really big, well-known art housey movie, but one that a lot of people still haven't seen. I think it's almost like having it on a list of the most important films that you can watch has made it a bit of a scarier watch for people, I think. Sometimes you see that something's like a very important film and you think, maybe I'm not going to give it the right amount of attention at the moment, or maybe I'm just going to have to like stand back and not do it. Maybe I'll do it later, maybe I'll hold off, maybe it'll be too inaccessible. And the funny thing about David Lynch's films is that with some caveats, I think he's one of the more accessible filmmakers who's often on those top 10 films of all times lists. And I think Mulholland Drive, for all of its really weird psychological, psychosexual thinking, is actually a really accessible film, partly because it started life not as a film, but as a TV pilot. It originally began as a pitch to ABC by David Lynch after the success of Twin Peaks, a long time after the success of Twin Peaks. And he says that the pilot was watched by a dude drinking coffee at 6 a.m. standing up while he was watching it, who apparently hated it, and they immediately cancelled the ongoing series. So he reached out to friends at Canal Plus, the French company, and they gave him the funding to make a feature-length version of the film, which kind of uses a different ending. Now, I've shared the script, so you guys can kind of have a look at it, but you can tell that there's a very definite split in Mulholland Drive around the hour mark, where the film rapidly becomes a different movie entirely. So you'll definitely know about the fact that it felt different, but I think it's interesting that Lynch manages to roll in that really difficult production problem into a movie that's now considered to be one of the top movies, certainly of the decade that it came out, and I think of the century so far. Let's say it. Don't be cowards. It's okay. So yeah, I'm just going to give people a little more time to come into the stream before we just carry on. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. I know that Phoebe hasn't seen Mulholland Drive, so sorry Phoebes, this might be inexplicable for you. I'm going to see if I can re-add the chat box without everything going nuts. Oh, I can see that chat box spamming. Very nice. Let's get rid of it. Bye. See if I can re-add it. Might help, might not help. So just to recap the plot of Mulholland Drive, if you saw it a while ago, maybe you didn't have time to rewatch it for this, but the rough plot of it, and it's a really difficult film to synopsize, so forgive me if this doesn't really reflect how you think and feel about the movie. Rita is a dark-haired amnesiac wandering in LA after a car crash. Aspiring actress Betty finds her having snuck into her aunt's apartment. They try to work out who she really is, while across town, a director finds his film taken over by mysterious outside forces. So it's like a testament to how completely different other people's understanding of the film can be, and how readable it is. That in Wikipedia, the plot with the director is described as having his film commandeered by mobsters. And I don't know, it was never my understanding that they were mobsters, if that makes sense. They almost seem like so concerned with who's in the movie that it almost has, it feels like no relevance to, it doesn't have a relevance to like why they're motivated to do that. They just seem like suddenly really super into finding out who's going to be in this movie and making sure it's the person they want to be in there. So that's the plot of Mulholland Drive, which I should say as a caveat also is like one of my favourite films. So if you're going to say you don't like it, that's fine, and I love different opinions. I know there's lots of people who don't like Lynch's films because they feel as though they're basically like weird for weird's sake, I think would be the way I would describe it. They're kind of like purposefully strange over like actually making sense or saying something maybe meaningful about human existence. I can see my chat box is still spamming, so I'm going to drop it. I'm getting a couple of drop frame notifications. Let me know if there's any issue on your end of things as you're watching this. I don't know why that would be happening, but this is Streamlabs, which is very strange sometimes, so forgive me if that's the case. But yeah, so as far as describing a plot for Mulholland Drive, I think it's difficult to say that there is a plot for it beyond those very loose kind of like genre-y descriptions. And it's really interesting that despite being such an arty and weird film, it has a really stakesy plot. It feels like a kind of standard drama plot, like a kind of romance thriller. But then, of course, the second half of the film takes place, and we see Diane Selwyn, who may or may not be Betty, waking up in her bed in the apartment that Betty and Rita are looking in to try and find more secrets about Rita's life at one point. And she seems to have had an affair with an actress who is Rita, as far as we can tell, only she goes by a different name, Camilla Rhodes. After a whole kind of series of events takes place, we have these kind of like bizarre this bizarre party and everything, and then we see Diane kill herself, and that's the end of the movie. And it's a fascinating plot because the question then becomes, well, which half of the film is real? Is it the first half of the movie with that kind of like soft focus American melodrama type feel, or is it the second half of the movie where a woman pointedly wakes up in her bed and experiences an alternate version of the reality that we saw before? And they do share a lot of elements. There's a lot that's linked between them. Look at you spamming, Phoebes. So yeah, what do we think? What do we think about Mulholland Drive? Is the second half of the film real, or is it the first half of the film that's real? And I see a lot of debate around the film kind of cast in these terms, like what is the reality of what's going on in Mulholland Drive? And ultimately, like, there isn't a solution. There is no truth behind the story, and I think that's basically the point. So I'll tell you what I think is going on. I think it's sort of both. Hollywood's kind of cast as a place of dreams. I've written this down, by the way, because it's like sometimes with Lynch's films I feel like gosh, if I just had a whiteboard and a couple of erasable markers, I could probably work this out in 3 or 4 hours. So it's nice to just marshal your thoughts sometimes. I think it's both. I think Hollywood in the film is portrayed as a sort of place of dreams and nightmares, to give it a back-of-the-box description. I think Diane in the latter half of the film, i.e. like the real world, as I've seen it described by a lot of people, is dreaming Betty, who we've seen for the first half of the movie. But also, to some extent, Betty is dreaming Diane. We see her kind of channeling that energy during her audition, and she's pushing for a resolution to Rita's story as well in a kind of like detective way, in that kind of the noir kind of pastiche elements in the film. I think elements of each storyline leak into each other as well. The most obvious way is names, because names kind of like just recur back and forward throughout the film. Most notably Diane Selwyn, and then also Camilla Rhodes, who is the real Rita, as it were. But that's kind of tied in with... the other big thing that leaks in, as it were, is the car crash that opens the film, because Camilla Rita is wearing that dress when we see her in the real world and also in the fake world, maybe. And so there seems to be an implication almost that after Diane goes and kills herself, Camilla's plot turns into that car crash. Betty arrives in a dream version of LA, meets Camilla/Rita, and then they go to investigate the apartment where a rotting body has been left, where Diane Selwyn's body is. And that to me is just so fascinating. It's like this Mobius strip plot. It doesn't really have a resolution that's, oh, it was a dream and this is the real things that was happening. And that backs up a lot of stuff that happens in Lynch's films. I've got a theory that sometimes filmmakers will make like a film as a run-up to another movie, and sometimes they'll even make a movie after that big middle movie that's kind of like them just still processing through those ideas but in different ways. And with David Lynch, I think you can make a good case for Lost Highway being a precursor to this film, in the sense that it has two is it true or is it not true looping narratives, plenty of doubles, and the narratives seem to kind of like curl back around in on themselves. They even have a stranger who seems to not follow the laws of physics or logic in the rules of the story, who recurs, and that's the pale man in Lost Highway, and the cowboy, the infamous cowboy of Mulholland Drive. And if you think about the other themes that Lynch processes throughout this film that are really like Lynchian, I think, you have doubles. I am always shocked at how many doubles there are in Lynch's films. People see themselves mirrored in other characters and in other circumstances. So in this, obviously, we have Diane and Betty, Rita and Carmilla, and we also see that in Lost Highway, where a character transforms into another character. That's taken to its kind of logical conclusion, I think, with Inland Empire, where Laura Dern's character is like, I don't know how many different characters she plays in that. I think it's up for debate. I'd say somewhere around like 6. And Twin Peaks, of course, also is full of doubles. Most importantly, you have Laura and the kind of dream version of her, and then her cousin who arrives. But also the in-universe soap opera, which always seems to be playing on people's TVs, and which kind of mirrors events that are taking place in the plot of the show in the town. And so again, like, characters are seeing themselves doubled in other characters, but also in narratives within that story. You see a little bit of that in Inland Empire, where a film that the actors are going to act in seems to have events that mirror the plot of the movie we're watching, and likewise the rabbits sections in that film have similar stories to Laura Dern's character and the people around her. So what's the truth? What's the secret of Mulholland Drive? What's the conclusion that we ought to draw from Lynch's mad story? I think it is kind of mad. I don't think there is a truth to the story. I think that's kind of the idea. There's not a truth behind it, because he's not trying to like give you a puzzle that ought to be solved. It's about interrogating the way that stories are constructed, especially I think in Hollywood and especially on film. And that's not really the same as like It Was All a Dream plot, because the idea for Lynch, I think, is that we are all living in Hollywood's dream, and certainly the characters in the film are. So there's that weird, like, over-the-top acting that kind of dominates the first half of the movie. There's a really strongly fractured story, obviously. And then there's, like, moments of photo montage where two shots superimpose over each other. You can see some in the thumbnail for this video, for instance. But also, like, the car crash has elements like that, too. And then we have archetypal characters like the mobsters, who are trying to take over Adam's film, and the cowboy, of course, who lives up in a big ranch and is a cowboy. I think he really is kind of like from Hollywood, as it were, the ideological Hollywood, not the physical place. So I see the film as Lynch using the tools and language of Hollywood melodrama to reinterpret a psychological thriller romance. I think the strange style touches in the film, like the aforementioned bad acting, like the chroma key dance sequence at the start of the film, which always takes me by surprise, all these kind of different dancers superimposed over each other. And also something that I always think about when I think about this film, which is the scene in Silencio in the club where the singer faints and her song is revealed to be a recording. To me, all of those elements are about a dropping of artifice, like that Lynch wants us to consider the artifice that films have in how they tell their stories, and is doing that by kind of lifting the veil. And that's why parts of the story seem to have their own logic, which doesn't seem to work with like the genre tropes that are otherwise quite comfortably in the film. I'm getting a lot of notifications about drop frames here, by the way, so let me know if there's any bad issues. Lovely stuff from Streamlabs, by the way. It tells you that you're having drop frames, but it won't allow you to stop streaming to change those settings. So beautiful. You love to see it. Nora Wee Smith, hi, how you doing? Yes, so it's not Lynch. I think it was Sherilyn Fenn, who's in Twin Peaks, who says it was originally supposed to be a spin-off about Audrey Horne. It was definitely designed to be a TV show, and there's a script for it, which I posted on the community tabs for this channel, which you can read. That's the script for the TV show, not for the film. Yeah, so it was definitely intended to be something else originally, and that's one of the reasons why there's such a disconnect between the first half and the second half. But to me, that almost adds to the point that Lynch is trying to make, because he ends up making a story about a director being forced to do stuff he doesn't want to do with his story. So he's kind of reflecting the troubles that he's having in producing the film there. It's sort of fascinating because I can't imagine it working as well as a TV show, because the film is such a singular story in the way that it approaches like having a twist that it doesn't care about, if that makes any sense. He's not really concerned with a twist being solvable or interesting in and of itself. He just likes the idea of having a twist, I think. Just checking my text, by the way. Sorry, I'm just trying to work out if I could text Phoebe and see if the dropped frames are happening. By the way, Nora, I haven't seen you comment before. Welcome to the channel. Thanks for coming along. And yeah, if you've seen Mulholland Drive, let's have a chat about that. I'm really fascinated by what other people make of this film. I've seen this film in the cinema twice, maybe 3 times, and on DVD. I probably watch it every other year. I rewatched it for this as well, and I find that it does really like allow multiple rewatchings, partially because there's so many different approaches even within the matter of the film. One of the really interesting like stunt kind of things that Lynch does is casting people who you might sort of recognize, like Angelo Badalamenti, his longtime composer, who is the guy who drinks the coffee that he doesn't like in the meeting that Adam, the director, is in. and also Billy Ray Cyrus, Miley's dad, who is kind of in between his fame here because the Miley Cyrus show won't start for a while, and Achy Breaky Heart has been and gone. I should say he is the guy who is shagging the director's wife. So, beautiful bit of casting for him. Yeah, hyper reality for sure. And again, like Lost Highway is such a good comparison for this film because they almost have structurally similar plots. So for those who haven't seen it, Lost Highway, I think this film has two halves that link at the ends. And Lost Highway is like one story that loops around on itself, and in the middle there's a shorter loop that continues on in the middle there and seems to have a completely different plot in and of itself. It's so strange to put like what is essentially a half-hour different narrative into the middle of the film, although it's one that's thematically linked and it shares actors, some of whom may or may not be doubles of characters who are in the other sections. Very cool movie, but I think Lost Highway is a lot rougher and a lot less accessible, and so it's interesting that like Mulholland Drive has a lot of the same themes, but it's a much more accessible way of doing it, partially I think because it is so couched in classic Hollywood tropes and formats, almost saturated in them. I wonder if you've seen Inland Empire, which is Lynch's like epic. It's basically his last film. I don't think he's going to do another film. But Inland Empire is like this times 11. It's crazy. It's set sort of in Hollywood. It has a huge amount of interconnected narratives that don't seem to share much, but apart from Laura Dern and her performance, but they're all about women put into different situations of difficulty, and a lot of them revolve around the production of a film in Poland and then again in LA, that's about a kind of missed romance between two actors, and the actors who were in it had that, and then Laura Dern and her love interest in the film, as far as you can call it that, have that kind of issue as well. And again, it's that kind of collage thing where here Lynch had written, the first hour of the film and then had to go away and make another half hour to put an ending on the end of the movie, in order to transform it from a TV pilot to a film. For Inland Empire, he was writing scripts as he went. I think they had a rough outline of stuff that would happen in the film, and then he just continued to write new sections that he could use. And it also incorporates quite long excerpts from a series of short films about people with rabbit heads who live in like a kind of sitcom apartment, that were done like years before the production of the film even. So in that sense, he's kind of collaging together different influences and different sections, different ways of approaching film language, I think would be the way to talk about it, in a single narrative that is itself almost indecipherable. And yet it all works. It's a lot less accessible than Mulholland Drive. It's a lot less fun. I think if you're a randomer, if you don't like watch arty movies or whatever that often, you can watch Mulholland Drive and get something out of it because the plot, at least for the first half hour, makes pretty good sense. You might be a bit like, why are these people acting like this? Why is their delivery so like kind of classical and stuff? But one more element that I suppose I could talk about a little bit is about the kind of horror sections of the film. I think there's a good argument for viewing Lynch as a horror director in some ways. He certainly is interested in horrific imagery and disturbing elements, but I think that's different, or at least like separable from the kind of genre horror, as it were. Like, he doesn't want ghosts, ghoulies, goblins, wolves and Draculas and all that kind of stuff. He wants to scare audiences and disturb the way that they approach his stories, and I think that can be really unsettling for people. Mulholland Drive has probably the most famous frightening section of any of Lynch's films, with the person who lives out the back of the diner, and it's this kind of just unreal figure who lives back there and seems to have something very specific to do with the blue key and whatever that means, like the separation between the two layers of reality. I generally have no idea what the blue key means, but I'm really interested that that he always uses like a primary color as a recurring thing in his films, because in Inland Empire there's an orange light bulb that recurs, and it's funny, just like the blue key, you know, it's really disturbing when you see it, and to work out how he builds disturbing in the context of his films is really fascinating, because that diner sequence where the guy describes his dream of the person who is behind the diner is so like scary, despite literally not showing anything in that first section. The camera, you're told what will happen. He describes in depth that there will be this kind of monstrous person out the back there, and then the camera goes out and does exactly the same navigation. It goes exactly the same way around the corner, down the alleyway, and there's no person there. And that's all good until much later in the film, when we find ourselves at that diner and we see our leads start to go outside and down that alleyway, because then we understand that the man who had dreamt of that section of the place was maybe just there at the wrong time, and now we're there at the right time. I think he was dreaming the bit we're looking at now, if that makes any sense. I hope I'm not getting wanky here. This is nuts. It's really difficult to talk about Lynch's films without sounding kind of stupid, like you're overthinking stuff, but I don't think he thinks about it at all in some ways. I think it's all instinctual for him, you know? He wants his films to come from the gut. It's just that Lynch is a weird guy. If you listen to David Lynch's music, it's like watching one of his films, but through your ears. Lynch describes the inspiration for one of his albums, which is about kind of parties, and he says that actually parties can be really scary, because you discover that you can go to a party with people you otherwise like, and then you can find that they have a very different definition of what they want to do for fun. And sometimes those things can be bad, like they cannot be good. You can be in a bad place or in a bad situation because of those things. And this film has that kind of feeling, because that's what Lynch's approach to filmmaking is like. It's how he understands the world, or how he understands films. And it's so singular and unique that you can find yourself pulled along for the ride, and it cannot be comfortable sometimes. I think he's only made one film that you could describe as comfortable, which is The Straight Story, which is actually one of them I haven't seen. There's only two of his films I haven't seen, which is The Straight Story and Wild at Heart with Nicolas Cage, because I don't know if David Lynch and Nicolas Cage is something I can bear as a human being. I guess we'll find out. It's on Netflix currently, so I'm hoping to watch it very soon. So anyway, that's me on Mulholland Drive. If you have anything else you want to talk about, let's have a chat. Let's have a talk in the comments. I can't monologue on Lynch for too long, because it's impossible without like having a whiteboard and some marker pens and the ability to show you a projection of his films, and this is what I think and feel about him. But I'm really interested to see what you think about his work as well. So I'm going to just stick around here for a couple minutes. If you've got any questions or anything you want to discuss, let's talk about it. Let's do it. Oh yeah. what I should add, it's absolutely boiling in here because it's really hot in the UK at the moment. But when I'm streaming, we live on a crossroads, so it's really loud outside. There's like accelerating cars out there right now as I say that, so we can't have the windows open while we're streaming. And like that's all cool, but it's sweaty. All right, I'll be honest. So forgive me if I just like rub my sweaty ears from my big headphones. Here's an interesting quote from Lynch. I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page. This is me, Will Webb, film critic, reading you the Wikipedia page. He describes the strange process by which the film was made by. He says, now, he's talking about rewriting it to become a feature film once he had to do that. Now, looking back, I see that the film always wanted to be this way. It just took this strange beginning to cause it to be what it is. Yes. So it's 18 pages of material, which mostly is the last section of the film, the last third of the film, but also the romantic relationship between Rita and Betty is added as well. It's interesting. And here's another interesting thing. Justin Theroux, who plays the director Adam in the film, said that he asked David Lynch a whole load of questions about the script, and Lynch basically wouldn't provide any answers apart from that Theroux's character was not autobiographical of Lynch. Apparently he really enjoys it when the cast are confused. So I can kind of get that. I think it gives the film a certain energy because the characters aren't aware of what's going on, right? That's the whole point. And so if the cast know what's going on, to some extent the energy of the film can change a bit, I think. I'm not saying you should leave the cast in the dark about everything, but you can see why he might say, I don't want to tell you what this thing is a symbol for me, because it will lead to you giving that interpretation to the film, and that will become more explicit in the movie. Oh. Very spicy in here. I'm so warm. If there's anything else you want to talk about as well, like not David Lynch things, let's have a chat here, because Da Five Bloods, which is a really interesting movie that just came out, that could have a whole stream for itself. I think it's always fascinating to talk about Spike Lee and his work, his like very varied body of work, and that has a lot of stuff in common, nevertheless. And there's also the truly useless Artemis Fowl, just released on Disney Plus, which is like not anything really. Now that's mystifying. People want to call David Lynch confusing. Why that film was ever commissioned or completed or tried to be released, it's very questionable. Okay, if you haven't got any questions, then I'm going to sign off here. Thank you so much for watching and for kind of being a part of the stream, having a conversation about Mulholland Drive. In this case, I think I was more like monologuing, but it's really, really nice in Norway. I hope I'm pronouncing that rightly, by the way. It's been nice to have a conversation with you about Mulholland Drive and to lecture my girlfriend, who is in the stream as well, about a film that she hasn't seen yet. We'll watch one day, because it's great. So I'm going to sign off here. Thank you so much, and I'll leave it open for a sec with the chat open, just so if you have anything to say as you go by, then you can do that. But have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Hi, I'm actually just back for a sec. I've just noticed that my Streamlabs, which is the thing that I stream through, has been not showing me a lot of the chat that's come through. I didn't realize people have been asking questions. So, Amir, you've been following me since 2017. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Do I have tips for growing a movie channel? Not really. I think you would be talking to the wrong person because I've had indietrix for like a decade and I only have about 4,000 subscribers. My biggest videos have been ones where I jumped on like a big release with a controversial opinion, and I got on it earlier than most people did. My biggest ever video happened basically by chance because it was a search term that I think people didn't see coming so much. I did a video about Captain America Civil War and about how I didn't like it, and it got lumped in with an algorithm that basically referred it to people who did like Marvel films. And what happened then was that everyone came in and hated it and commented on it. But they all watched it and they all engaged with the video, so YouTube really promoted that video, which was quite a difficult thing because it was just like just had very annoyed people talking to me and occasionally saying like quite violent stuff, which wasn't nice. But oh well, I got to where I am. So I hope that helps. Basically, watch films when they come out and talk about them as soon as possible after they come out. And if you can put something clickbaity in the title, then that's probably good if you just want views. If you want to be like a good critic, you might not want to do that all the time. Norway, you're right, the diner scene is creepy AF. The director is not the same guy as the guy in Inland Empire. Let me just double check that. I'm pretty sure that the guy in Inland Empire is Jeremy Irons. Oh no, it does have Justin Theroux in it. I'm just reading about this. Justin Theroux is the lead actor in the film. He's not the director, who's Jeremy Irons. Yeah. Kevin, hey, how you doing? I couldn't give this film more of a yay than I already have. I think it's one of the best films of the last 20 years, especially for someone who likes films. Like, if you like movies, then this film has a lot to say to you because it kind of rips Hollywood quite harshly, but in interesting ways. Because I don't think it amounts to being like Hollywood's bad, but it says a lot about kind of how films are constructed, how narratives are constructed about Hollywood, about fame, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, watch Mulholland Drive. It's great. You haven't seen it yet then? Yes, Norway's white. Right, it's definitely yay. Absolutely. You've seen it then? I definitely give it a yay. Yeah, it's fantastic. And I love all of Lynch's work. Funnily enough, actually, the first thing I ever saw by David Lynch was Inland Empire, which I definitely think is not the right one to start with. It really helps to have a bit of a grounding in Lynch and what he actually does. No, I haven't seen Twin Peaks Season 3. I've seen Twin Peaks Season 1, and I was told he wasn't really involved in Twin Peaks Season 2, so I didn't watch that. And I'm looking forward to jumping into Season 3 at some point. I don't have any like TV subscriptions that covered it, and I can't afford the Blu-ray pack for it yet, but I would love to watch it, so fingers crossed. If you haven't seen it though, I would recommend watching Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which is the sequel slash prequel to Twin Peaks. It was very badly received when it first came out, and it was kind of viewed as Lynch just like going up his own arse and not really coming out much. And I think critical appraisal of it has gotten a lot better over the last couple of years. Yeah, it has a lot of horror elements in it, like I was saying about this. But yeah, Fire Walk with Me, if you haven't seen it, is kind of like the forgotten of Lynch's filmography, except maybe Dune, but I don't really know if I count that. Although speaking of Dune, I am actually well looking forward to the new one, so... Firewalk with Me is super, super good in interesting ways that aren't always easy to understand. I think my big thing about Firewalk with Me is that it's rough, like it's all over the shop in some ways, like we've been saying, a lot of Lynch's work is, but it introduces a lot of what I like about Lynch's films versus Twin Peaks back in. So there's a lot more like abstract elements. There is probably the scariest sequence in any Lynch film, which involves David Bowie as well, because why not? Why not be super surreal? Yeah, I can't really describe it well enough. It's a really odd experience, but well worth watching. And it's interesting because it's pitched mostly as a prequel, but actually should only be seen after seeing the series. It relies on you knowing a lot about Bob and about Laura Palmer and her story. Oh, and it also gives her a real like kind of acting showcase as well. I should probably ask as well, is there any suggestions for the next movie club? What would people like to watch? It'd be nice to know what you would like to discuss on the channel. I have a big list that I drew up, which I can share, but one film I'd really like to talk about is Night of the Hunter, which is like a 1940s, I want to say, maybe it's 50s. Oh, I'm really glad you said that, Kevin. Yes, I am in complete agreement that Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, and Inland Empire are a trilogy, and they could be watched as such. Yeah, in fact, I'll go one further and say that I think they're almost close to being the same film in terms of how they are about identity in LA. Lost Highway also has a really similar plot structure to Mulholland Drive, because it has a loop in its narrative as well as having a loop within its narrative. It has the first section of the film with Bill Pullman kind of loops around on itself again at the end of the story, and then the middle section of the film loops around in on itself, it would seem. And more disturbingly, I think, in that, because I find that film much more horrific than almost the rest of his work, maybe bar Eraserhead. The most disturbing thing about that sequence for me is that all the characters in that middle section seem to be aware of events sort of turning around on themselves and looping back again. Oh, you're in Thailand. Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, I don't know what the film markets are like out there. It is quite hard to find some of Lynch's films anyway. There was actually a really good re-release of The Elephant Man done in the UK and America a couple of years ago. So I wonder if you can find that. It's done on Blu-ray by Cohen Media, I want to say. Yeah, let me know what films you would like to talk about in the next movie club, which will be next month. I really like Night of the Hunter, which is the only film directed by kind of veteran black and white actor Charles Laughton. It's got Robert Mitchum in it, in a really kind of harrowing, weird role. And it also does a lot of strange stuff with cinematography. There's a lot of like forced perspective and shadow puppetry and like split screen. And bear in mind, this film is like from the 50s. So yeah, a really interesting film that we could talk about. But I'm open to suggestions too. I would like to make sure that this carries on being about weird films and films that you don't often see discussion of online. I love being a film critic and I love all that stuff, but I do find that you constantly have to talk about the same 4 films that come out each year as if those are like the only movies that is allowed to talk about. And that's as true of the art house scene as it is of the mainstream as well. The issue with the mainstream one is that the films don't tend to be good. They tend to be like the Marvel movies and some Disney stuff. And unfortunately in art house, like, it means great films like Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Uncut Gems really dominate the conversation, when there are other movies we could talk about too, like Beanpole. It's a Russian film that I didn't like that much, but had a lot of really interesting stuff in it. So I'd like this to be a space where we can talk about older movies by and large, because they should be stuff that you should be able to get hold of, that people might not have seen, but have nevertheless like massive significance and interest for people. And they don't even have to be like art house films. I'm happy for it to be an older action movie or something like that. I would love to talk about the Jean-Claude Van Damme film, JCVD, but maybe that's for another time. Have I seen the Soviet war film Come and See? No, it was one of my brother's favourite films. I would love to see if it's had a remaster. Ooh, proper remaster, just in December. Very cool. Janus did it. Okay, great. So we should be able to get it in the UK as well. Fingers crossed that there's a bit of a run for that when it comes out. I have seen The Lighthouse. I did a review of it. I'm probably not going to do The Lighthouse on this because I'd like this to be about older films that we can kind of rediscover together as well. Also with The Lighthouse, I think it's so new that we've not had time to step back from it and think about it for a bit. I did get to meet the director. I saw a lecture that he did at BAFTA last year, and then he met up with a bunch of younger filmmakers as part of a BAFTA program that I'm in. And yeah, he's a really fascinating guy, is Robert Eggers, and about as intense as you'd imagine he is. I'm excited to see his next film that he's working on currently. I think they've had to pause production for lockdown though. Yeah, this Come and See film looks great, and I'm a sucker for kind of anti-war stuff, anything around kind of political violence as well. I know it sounds like a weird thing to be interested in, but I really love Taiwanese cinema, for instance, where war violence often comes up. So not even just war violence, political violence. I'm definitely going to add Come and See to the list. There we go. So when I was making this list, my kind of like criteria was that the film should be readily available as well. Where is my little list? There we go. Yeah, it's like the movie should be something that a lot of people won't have seen but might have heard of, and it should be something that introduces them to something they're not otherwise going to watch. And it should also hopefully have some kind of critical discourse around it already, so people can go and read about it. It'd be lovely to talk about like films that no one's seen, but then that I worry about making stuff inaccessible for people, and I don't want people to feel put off by stuff being too hard to get into. And also it should be something that's readily available. So even like I've got a couple here that actually aren't even that easy to get hold of. Like one of the films that I've always wanted to do on this is Afterlife by Hirokazu Koreeda, which is a really beautiful film about old life. Yeah, I absolutely Taiwanese films are almost impossible to find. So the film that I would love to do on this, but I will never do, is A City of Sadness, Hao Xiaoxian's film about... It's kind of like a longitudinal drama around the history of this like Taiwanese family over the course of a very tumultuous couple of years, where the government changes hand like 3 times. There's lots of political violence, and it's a fantastic film. It's unbelievably good, but you can't get it. I think there's a Criterion digital version, but I don't think it's on available release. If it is, it's not in print anymore. There's a VHS, a Criterion VHS. I think there's a Laserdisc that you can get in some places. And apart from that, that's it. Which is wild, because he's incredibly famous, especially over there. And I saw it recently in Close-Up Cinema in London, and they played it off a film print. And that film print is from the one time it played in the UK, from its London Film Festival screening of the movie, the original screening. And you could tell because there's a Mayor of London stamp on the film. Or not Mayor of London, whatever the equivalent body was at the time. You can get like a semi-permanent license, which is just nuts that this is a single film print from 1985 of this film, and that's how we got to see it. Movies I've ever seen. And I love his work. I could talk about that all day. But I fear that like it's not much sense of me doing a discussion video about films that people can't see, as fun as that might be for me. I'm just trying to see what else is on the list, so I'm just going to copy and paste some in. Oh no, tell a lie, this could be incredibly difficult. I have Tukib's film, Beau Travail, which is a French film but set in North Africa somewhere. Tony Erdmann, now that is a recent film, but a very, very good one. German-Romanian comedy drama. The Fisher King, Terry Gilliam film, love to talk about. A couple more, like Jubilee by the... that film is very strange indeed, but very good. It has a very young Adam Ant in it. Oh, I do have Come and See on here already. That's great. Okay, that shows it. Well, maybe that's it then. Yeah, and Hao Xiaoxian was around for such a long... Is it still making films? But like that's his first set of movies in 1985 when City of Sadness came out. And then he's part of the kind of second wave of those filmmakers, like with Millennium Mambo, which is absolutely amazing. And again, like impossible to get hold of. But really fantastic. Just like very different film to City of Sadness too. Yeah, okay, we can take away from this. People ought to be releasing Taiwanese films, shouldn't they? They ought to have a wider release. I think Criterion are the only people really releasing it. They've done a couple of Edward Yang's movies. And, you know, it's a bit of a shame because you get people like Ingmar Bergman, whose films are very widely released and continuously re-released because people always go to see them. And he's fantastic and he has this big filmography, but it does mean that other filmmakers don't always get as much attention as they should. I think that can change too. I've definitely seen Ozu, Yasuhiro Ozu, the Japanese kind of maestro. I've seen his films kind of being more widely released. And in fact, the BFI is doing a wide release of his movies, or some of them, this month, I think. I've actually gone full on slideshow here. I can see I've just like, my frame rate's totally stuck. Okay, folks, thank you for your suggestions. I think I'm going to sign off now. Thanks so much for watching the stream. Apologies for the technical issues that I've had over the course of it as well, both not reading your chat and also the current slideshow of frame rate that you're watching too. Hopefully they'll all be sorted by next time I stream. Not sure when that will be yet, but I'll be announcing a pick for Movie Club pretty soon, so keep your eye out for it. That's it from me, but I'm going to leave the chat open for a sec, so if you want to say bye, you can jump in there, and have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your evenings.